Today we're going to look at modeling the product of a polynomial and a constant term. So first example, 1, is write a simplified expression for the perimeter of a given square. So here's my square. You'll notice there's lines all on the sides. That means that all my lengths are the same. They all happen to be the same as this. They're all 3x plus 2. That's what that means. Those lines on the edges mean. Also, if you think about perimeter, what does that mean? Perimeter is adding up the lengths of all the sides. So we're going to add the lengths of all the sides of the square. So perimeter, as you might know it, is P is equal to, and I would add this. I would add this one plus this one plus this one plus this one. So 3x plus 2, that's one polynomial. That's what we call these. Different terms together are called polynomials. The second term, 3x plus 2. Third term, 3x plus 2. And the fourth term, 3x plus 2. Notice these are all the exact same 3. I have 3x plus 2 and another 3x plus 2 and another 3x plus 2 and another 3. Really, I have 4 3x plus 2's. So I can represent this by writing 4 times 3x plus 2. As you recall, I'm not writing the x in between because we don't want to confuse x with multiplication. So this means 4, and when it's outside the bracket, it means multiply. So remember, this operation is multiplication. So this really means 4 times 3x plus 2. Okay. So how we're going to do this is something you haven't learned before. We call it distributive property. Why? Because I'm going to distribute this 4 with every term in the bracket. I'm going to multiply the 4 times the 3x plus 2 and 4 times the 3x and the 4 times the 2. So I'm going to write this out as you would see it. It's going to be 4 times 3x. So you notice I'm multiplying the 4 times the first term and then the 4 times the second term. Now what happens when I have a number multiplied by a term with a variable? I just multiply the number by the number and the x remains the same in this case. We will be looking at more complex ones in further lessons. So 4 times 3x is going to be 4 times 3, which is 12. And then it means I have 12 x's, so it's 12x. And then I multiply the number by the number, so it's 4 times 2, which is 8. So that's 12x plus 8 is my perimeter. So perimeter usually has units. It doesn't say centimeters or meters or kilometers, so I'm just going to write units. So remember, perimeter is just units. It's not per unit squared. It's not centimeters squared, just the centimeters. So here, this says to multiply a polynomial by a constant term. So constant's just a number. Constant term. We multiply each term of the polynomial by the constant. So this is my polynomial, 3x plus 2, and we'll multiply the number, which is called our constant term, by each term. So 4 times the 3x and 4 times the 2. This is what we call distributive property. Let's look at some more examples. So example 2 says expand. In other words, we're going to multiply. So our first example, so we're going to expand 3 times 2x plus 1. So we're going to take the constant, which is 3. I'm going to multiply it by the 2x. and I'm going to multiply the 3 by the 1. So I'm multiplying it by each term. So I get 6x plus 3. Now if you look at b, I'm going to do negative 3 times 3x. Remember, if any time you fall behind in copy, you can just pause. So negative 3. So the sign stays with the term. Times 3x. And then again, negative 3. So I'm going to write this as negative 3 here. Times 2. So remember, your integer rules are important here. A negative times a positive is still a negative. So it's negative, and 3 times 3 is 9. And then I'm going to do negative 3 times 2, so negative times a positive is a negative. So it's negative 6. And I write that out. So if it's negative, it becomes negative here. Okay. And that's my answer. Notice with this one and this one, now these are not like terms, so I can't add negative 9 and negative 6 because this is x's and this is just a number. They're not like terms. So I can't go any further. Now I'm going to multiply the 5 by the x. So again, I'm distributing each one. Okay, to write that there. So the 5 times x and the 5 times the negative 3. So 5 times x. And then plus. So the sign in front of the 5 is positive. That's why I put the plus. Times negative 3. 5 times x. Well, I got to multiply the number that's by the number. If you think about it, there's an invisible 1. So it's 5 times 1. So just 5x. And then here it's 5 times negative 3. So 5 times negative 3 is going to be a negative answer. So it's 1 positive, 1 negative. 5 times negative 3 is going to be negative 15. Again, notice these are not like terms. Okay, so let's do this one. Negative 4 times the 3x and negative 4 times the negative 2. So the negative 4 gets multiplied by each term in the bracket. Remember, terms are separated by plus and minuses. So 4 times 3x. And whatever this sign is, it's going to go here too. Negative 4 times negative 2. So 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. X. Negative 4 times negative 2 is negative. Is it negative? I almost caught myself there. So negative times a positive is a negative. But a negative times a negative is a positive. So negative 4 times negative 2 is positive. Okay, so here we have more examples. Now you'll notice here there's 3 terms in this bracket. So remember, x squared and x is not like terms. They are different exponents on the variables. It's the same idea, except now I'm multiplying 3 times. So I'm going to multiply the 2 times x squared, 2 times 2x, and 2 times negative 3. So I jumped ahead and I didn't even read the instructions, which is not a good idea. We always should read instructions. Example 3, simplify the following. So simplify, also means to expand and to simplify. So I'm going to do 2 times each term in the bracket, 2 times x squared. So it's 2 is positive, so I'm going to write plus 2 times 2x, and then plus 2 times negative 3. So 2 times x squared, remember there's an invisible 1 here, so I'm multiplying 2 times 1, which is 2. So I have 2x squareds, 2 times 2, which is positive 4. So I have 4x's, and then 2 times negative 3. Positive times a negative is a negative. Again, notice 3 different terms. These are not like terms. I can't add any of these because they are not the same. So again, 4 times each term in the brackets. Terms are separated by plus and minuses. So I'm going to multiply the 4 times the 2x squared. And then the positive 4. It's plus here, that's why I'm writing plus, times the negative 3x. And then positive 4 times 2. So 4 times 2 is 8. So I have 8x squared. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. And 4 times 2 is 8. Again, 3 different terms. They're not like terms. Okay, so here we have negative 3 outside the brackets. You could choose to skip this step if you'd like to just multiply in your head. So I'll show that right now. So it depends which one you feel more comfortable with, but you have to be careful. If you're not comfortable with it, you should show the step. If you feel comfortable, you can do the multiplication in your head. So here there's a negative 3, and remember, anything with is not there, there's a 1 there. So that's negative 3 times 1. So I'd write negative 3. It's negative 3x squared. Then I do negative 3 times negative 2. Negative times a negative is a positive, so it's positive 6x. Then negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. So remember, we're always multiplying each term. This negative outside, just like that, that's actually right like a negative 1 outside. So if you want, just write that in. It might help. We can actually write that there. And we can make a note that there's an invisible 1 here. So negative 1 times 1. So negative times a positive is a negative. So it's negative 1x squared. And then negative 1 times negative 3 is a positive. Because the negative times a positive is a positive. And then negative 1 times 2, negative times a positive is a negative. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. Okay, so you can write out the negative 1, or you can choose just to write it as negative x squared plus 3x minus 2. As you do more practice and get more comfortable, you will notice you're automatically not going to be writing that 1. You'll just write it as negative x squared. Okay, so simplify it. We're adding or subtracting. Okay, here's the trick to this. So we have two brackets that we're trying to add to each other. So here there's an actual we have to actually follow BEDMAS. There's an invisible one here that I'm going to need to multiply by every bracket. There's also an invisible one here I need to multiply by every bracket. That shouldn't be too tricky because we know that 1 times anything is just itself. So 1 times 1 is 1. So I have 1x squared. 1 times negative 2x is just negative 2x. 1 times negative 4, because 1 times anything is itself, it's just negative 4. Now here, same thing. 1 times x squared is just 1x squared. 1 times negative 3 is just negative 3x. You'll notice I'm writing the exact same thing because I'm multiplying everything by 1. 1 times 5 is 5. Now this should look familiar. This is like collecting your like terms. Now I'm going to find my like terms. I have an x squared and an x squared. I have a negative 2x. So it's the sign in front of it always goes with it, and a negative 3. Then I'm left with my negative 4 and positive 5. So I'm going to put them together with their signs. So I'm going to do 1x squared and a 1x squared. Then I have negative 2x and negative 3x. Then I have negative 4 and positive 5. So the sign in front of it goes with it. So now I'm going to add. And when you add my like terms, so 1x squared and 1x squared, I have 2x squareds. These are both negative. So remember, when you're adding two negatives, it becomes a bigger negative. I have a negative 2x and negative 3x. It's negative 5x. Then I have negative 4 plus 5. I have more positives than negatives, so it's going to be a positive answer. I have one more positive than I have negatives, so it's plus 1. You'll notice the end result, I have one less, I have no like terms. So that's simplifying. So again, let's look at this. Remember, I have a 1 outside here and a 1 outside here. So I'm going to take this 1 and multiply it by everything in the brackets. Take this 1 and multiply it by everything in the bracket. 1 times anything itself, so this is quite easy because 1 times 4x squared is 4x squared. 1 times 5x is 5x. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Then 1 times 3x is just 3x squared. 1 times negative 7x is just negative 7x. And 1 times negative 6 is negative 6. Now I gotta simplify, so I gotta find my like terms. Here's my 4x squared. Where's my other x squared? Here it is. Then I have 5x, so it's plus 5x minus 7x. So these are like terms. And last I have my numbers, negative 1 and negative 6. So let's bring them together. 4x squared and 3x squared. 5x and negative 7x. Then I have negative 1 and negative 6. 4x squared and 3x squared is 7x squared. 5x minus 7x, they're opposite signs, so it's going to be a positive or negative. I have more negatives than I have positives, so it's definitely going to be a negative. And let's think how many more negatives I have. 5 to 7, there's 2 more negatives. So it's negative 2x. These are both negatives, negative 1 and negative 6, so it's going to become a bigger negative. So add them. I have negative 1 and negative 6 becomes negative 7. So again, remember there's invisible ones outside here. Now this is a little different because there's a minus here. So I got to keep that in mind. Positive 1 times 5 is just 5x squared. And positive 1 times negative 4 is negative 4x. But this becomes tricky. Here it's a negative 1. Negative 1 times 3 is a negative. Positive times a negative makes a negative. Negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2x. So when I'm multiplying a negative times a positive, the result's going to be negative. So here the difference changed in the signs. Okay, so it's a little different than the pluses. Then I'm going to collect my like terms. So these are alike, and these are alike. So that's 5x squared and negative 3x squared and negative 4x, negative 2x. So now add your like terms. 5x squared minus 3x squared. So 5x squared, and I'm subtracting 3x squared. I have 2x squareds left. Here I have a negative 4x's and I have more negative x's. So it's negative 4x and negative 2x. So I have a larger negative, so I'm 6 negative x's. So again, remember there's an invisible one here. So I'm going to multiply 1 times everything. That's what I'm doing. Distributive property. So we're going to multiply 1 times x squared is just x squared. 1 times positive 3x is positive 3x. 1 times negative 2 is negative 2. Negative 1 times 3x. So here this is a negative, so that becomes a negative 3x squared. Here this is negative 1 times negative 5. So different signs. I mean, they're the same sign. So the negative 1 times the negative 5 becomes now a positive. So notice the signs are changing because there's a negative 1 out here. And then negative 1 times 7 is negative 7. So those integers that we've reviewed, if you've had trouble with them, I'm going to need to freshen up. So I'm collecting like terms now, looking for everything that's alike. You'll notice all our lessons are building. That's why it's important you stay caught up. So x squared and negative 3x squared, I write it, the signs go with it. Positive 3x, positive 5x, and then negative 2 and negative 7. So remember there's an invisible one here, so 1x squared and negative 3x. I have more negatives than a positive, so it's going to definitely be a negative answer. So let's see, I have 1 positive and 3 negatives, and that leaves me with 2 negatives. 3x and 5x, that's 2 positives, so I'll just add them. 3x's and 5x's makes 8x's. And then I have negative 2 and negative 7. Negative 2 minus 7. They're both negative, so it's a negative answer. They're just more negatives. Add them. Negative 2 minus 7 is negative 9. And there you go. Notice there's no more like terms. My final answer, so I stopped there. Okay. So you learned a distributive property, and within this distributive property, we're collecting like terms.